She's leaving you tomorrow. I want you too. They're coming for us.
Who?
People from my past. This is too dangerous. But I need you.
He was in the parking lot of his office building at 9:40 on a Tuesday night when the passenger door opened. He had not unlocked it. He had been sitting with the engine running, too tired to drive and too awake to go home, doing the specific nothing that people do at the end of days that have asked too much of them. The door opened and a woman got in. He turned. It was Natalie, his wife's best friend. Her face was not the face he knew, the composed, direct face of someone who managed situations. This was the face of someone who had been crying recently and was currently managing the aftermath. She looked straight ahead for a moment. Then she turned to him, and she said, in a voice so quiet he had to lean forward to hear it, "She's leaving you tomorrow." He said nothing. She said, "The papers are already drawn up. She has a new place. It's all done. She's telling you tomorrow morning." He sat in the parking lot and stared at the windshield. And then Natalie said something else, something he was not prepared for. Something that changed the situation from a broken marriage into something significantly more dangerous. He sat in that car for 2 hours after Natalie got out, and by the time he drove home that night, he had understood one thing with complete clarity. The man his wife was leaving him for was going to destroy her, and nobody was going to stop it except him. Please like this video. Those likes make such a difference. Hit the button. Subscribe too, it costs nothing. Drop a comment and tell me where in the world you're watching from. Now let me take you back to where this all started. Marcus Cole was 40 years old and had been married to his wife, Jennifer, for 7 years. He was a civil engineer, project management, infrastructure, the kind of work that requires sustained patience and a tolerance for complexity that never fully resolves. He was good at his job in the way that people are good at things that match how their mind works. He did not cut corners. He came back to problems until they were right. He was the person his team called when something was genuinely difficult. He had brought these qualities to his marriage. He was not a perfect husband. He worked long hours during project cycles. He sometimes forgot to say things he was thinking, because saying them required a shift of attention from whatever problem he was currently solving, and the shift didn't always happen in time. He was present more in the background than the foreground, a steady, reliable presence rather than a dramatic one. He had thought Jennifer valued this about him. He had been in certain important ways wrong. Jennifer Cole was 38 and had spent the past 2 years experiencing the specific restlessness of someone who has built a life that is objectively good and has discovered that good is not quite enough for the version of herself she has decided she deserves to become. She was a marketing director at a regional firm, competent, respected, someone whose professional trajectory had been consistent and whose personal trajectory had not matched it in ways she had been feeling privately for 2 years. She had met a man named Victor Harlan at an industry event 8 months ago. Victor was 45 and presented himself with the confidence of wealth, the right suit, the right watch, the right combination of ease and precision that communicated to certain people that this was a man who operated at a level worth aspiring to. He was not that man. This was the thing that Jennifer did not know. This was the thing that Natalie, after 3 months of uncomfortable suspicion and 2 weeks of direct investigation, had discovered and had sat with and had finally decided she could not sit with any longer. Natalie Brooks was 37 and had been Jennifer's closest friend since college. She was direct in the way that people who have spent years being the honest person in their social group become direct, not unkindly, but without the softening that makes truth easier to ignore. She had told Jennifer the things she didn't want to hear more than once over 20 years. Jennifer had not always thanked her for it. Natalie had also carried, for the past 8 months, something she had not articulated to anyone. She had tried not to feel it. She had told herself it was projection. She had attributed it to the specific intimacy of long friendship with someone's spouse, the way you come to know a person through another person's eyes and mistake familiarity for something else. She had tried. She had been in the parking lot for 20 minutes before she opened the car door. She had told herself she was there for Jennifer. That was mostly true. Victor Harlan's real name was not Victor Harlan. He had been operating under various professional identities for 11 years across 4 states. The pattern was consistent. Find a woman in a professional context, present the markers of significant wealth, real enough in the short term to be credible, not real enough to survive scrutiny, develop a rapid, intense personal connection, establish a financial entanglement under the guise of investment opportunities or shared business ventures, and exit before the questions became specific enough to require answers. He had done this 6 times. 3 of the women had lost significant savings. 1 had lost her business. 1 had come close to losing her house. None of them had pressed charges. Each one had felt afterward the specific combination of shame and self-blame that prevented the report that might have stopped the next one. Jennifer was the next one. She did not know this. Victor had been very careful to not let her know. Natalie had told Marcus everything she had found out. Not in a speech, in fragments between pauses, in the specific halting way of someone delivering information they had been holding for too long. Victor Harlan's photograph had appeared in a financial fraud alert she had come across through a work connection. A colleague in a legal compliance role who had flagged the name in passing. The photograph was 3 years old and the name was different, but the face was unmistakable. She had spent 2 weeks verifying. She had called 2 of the previous women. She had found them through her compliance contact. She had confirmed the pattern. She had then spent 1 additional week deciding what to do. She had gone to the parking lot because she could not go to Jennifer. She said, I tried to tell her 3 weeks ago. I said I was worried about Victor, that I had heard things. She told me I was jealous. She said I had never liked her being happy. Natalie paused. She hasn't spoken to me properly since. Marcus said, You found documentation? She said, enough to take seriously. Not enough for a formal complaint on my own. I'd need more. Marcus said, Send it to me. She said, Marcus. He said, Send me everything you have. She sent it before she got home. He read it at the kitchen table while Jennifer slept upstairs, in the house that Jennifer had apparently already arranged to leave. He read the documentation twice. Then he called his cousin Alan, who was a financial fraud investigator with a firm that worked with both civil and federal cases, and who answered his phone at 11:30 because Alan knew that calls from Marcus at that hour were not casual. Marcus said, I need your help, tonight if possible. The next morning, Jennifer came downstairs at 7:15. Marcus was at the kitchen table with his coffee. She sat down across from him. She said, Marcus, I need to talk to you about something. He said, I know. She looked at him. He said, about the divorce, about Victor Harlan. Her expression moved through several stages very quickly. She said, How? He said, That's not the most important conversation right now. He slid a folder across the table. Read this first. She looked at the folder. She said, What is this? He said. Victor Harlan's real history, going back 11 years, with documentation. She did not touch the folder immediately. She said, Marcus, I know you're upset and I understand that you would want to. Jennifer, his voice was quiet. Please read the folder. She looked at his face. She picked up the folder. She read it at the kitchen table for 40 minutes without saying anything. When she finished, she looked up. He said, He's done this 6 times. The investment opportunity he proposed to you, where exactly is your money in that process? Jennifer looked at him. She said, I've given him an initial deposit. Marcus said, How much? She said the number. He said, When was the next deposit scheduled? She said, Next week. He said, We need to stop it. Please like this video. Those likes matter so much. Subscribe if you haven't. Drop a comment. Where are you watching from right now? Now let's talk about what Marcus and Alan did to stop Victor. Alan Cole spent 3 days with the documentation Natalie had provided and the additional material Marcus had gathered through his own research. He confirmed what Natalie had found and found additional layers. Victor Harlan's current operation had 2 active targets. Jennifer was one. There was a second woman in a different city at an earlier stage of the same pattern. Alan said, This is federal jurisdiction. The interstate element makes it clear. But federal investigations move on their own timeline and Jennifer's second deposit is next week. Marcus said, What can I do before that timeline? Alan said, Document everything Jennifer has already given him. The wire transfer. The investment agreement he had her sign, I assume there's a document. Marcus said she has a copy. Alan said that document, combined with what we already have on the previous cases, is enough to support a civil freeze on the transaction if we move today. Marcus said, Do it. Alan's firm filed for the civil freeze the same afternoon. Victor's attorney, if he had one, which was unclear, did not respond to the filing. The second deposit, scheduled for the following Wednesday, was blocked. Marcus told Jennifer about the filing on the evening Alan confirmed it. She had been in the house. She had not left. She had not said anything about the divorce since the kitchen table conversation. She had spent 3 days in a specific private reckoning that Marcus could see happening and had not intruded on. He told her about the civil freeze. She said, You stopped the transfer. He said, Yes. She was quiet for a moment. She said, The money I already gave him. He said, Alan is working on recovery. I can't promise anything on that. She said, How much of this did you know before this week? He said, Nothing. Until Tuesday night. She said, Natalie. He said, Nothing. She looked at the table. She said, I was horrible to her. He said, She was still in that parking lot. Jennifer pressed her hand over her mouth for a moment. She said, Marcus. He said, I know. She said, I was going to. He said, I know that too. She said, Does it matter to you that I was leaving? He looked at his wife across the kitchen table, this woman he had been married to for 7 years, who had been planning to leave him, who had nearly lost a significant amount of money to a man who made a career of this. He said, "Of course it matters, but it's a separate conversation from Victor, one thing at a time." Victor Harlan, when the civil freeze went through and Alan's firm filed the formal complaint with the Federal Financial Crimes Unit, did what he always did when situations became complicated. He disappeared. His phone numbers went dark within 48 hours of the filing. His office address, which had been a serviced business address that required no permanent tenancy, was vacated. He was gone. Marcus had expected this. Alan had expected this. The federal investigation would take time. These things took time. Victor would resurface because the pattern was the pattern, and patterns are harder to break than people expect. But the second deposit had been blocked. Jennifer's remaining savings were safe. The initial deposit recovery was partial but real. 18 months later, through the civil proceedings, she received back approximately 60% of what she had given him. Victor was eventually identified and arrested in a different state. 2 years later, through a combination of the federal complaint Alan had filed and a parallel investigation in another jurisdiction, he was convicted. The women he had taken money from over 11 years were named in the sentencing statement. Jennifer was one. The divorce happened anyway. Not immediately, not in the week after Victor disappeared, but in the months that followed, as Marcus and Jennifer tried to find a version of their marriage that could survive the weight of what the previous 8 months had revealed. The distance, the planning, the goodbye speech that had been written but never delivered. They arrived, together and honestly, at the conclusion that they were past the point of reconstruction. It was not a bitter divorce. It was a tired one. The specific tiredness of two people who have been trying and have acknowledged that the trying has an end. Marcus said, in their last real conversation before the legal process began, "I don't regret the past 7 years." Jennifer said, "Neither do I," he said. "I hope you find what you were looking for," she said. "I hope you do too." They meant both things. Natalie and Jennifer had a conversation 3 months after the divorce was finalized. Jennifer called. Natalie answered. Jennifer said, "I owe you an apology that I'm not sure I can make adequate." Natalie was quiet. Jennifer said, "You tried to tell me. You went to Marcus when I wouldn't listen. You protected me from something I couldn't see coming." Natalie said, "I know you thought I was jealous." Jennifer said, "I was wrong about that." A pause. Natalie said, "I was also not being entirely simple about my motivations. There's something I need to be honest with you about." Jennifer said, "I know." Natalie said, "You know?" Jennifer said, "I've known for a while. I think I was angry about it before I was angry about Victor, and I made Victor the reason." A pause. "It's okay, I mean that." Natalie said. Jennifer said, "I want you to be happy. I want Marcus to be happy. If those things can happen together, I want that." It was not easy. It was not immediate. But it was honest, which is the beginning of everything. Marcus's uncle died 6 months after the divorce. His uncle Harold had been the quiet member of the family, a man who had built a small manufacturing company in the Midwest that had been struggling for several years and whose management had not survived the transition from founder to next generation. Harold had no children. He had left the company to Marcus. Marcus had visited the company twice in his life. He had sat in the meeting with the estate attorney and looked at the balance sheet and seen, through the lens of 12 years of project management, not a company that was failing, but a company that had been mismanaged. He had taken the inheritance. He had spent 6 months in the company before he changed anything, watching, reading, understanding the systems and the people and the specific ways that it had gone wrong. Then he had started changing things, not dramatically, methodically, in the order that the problems required rather than the order that looked most impressive. He made one significant hire in the first year, a CO named Patricia who had spent 15 years in manufacturing operations and who, when Marcus described what he was trying to build, had said, "I want to be part of that." Patricia was good. The company was better with Patricia. And it was better still in year 2 and year 3. The growth that followed was not accidental. It was the specific compound interest of correct decisions made in sequence by people who understood what they were building. By the end of year 4, the company that Harold had left Marcus at a valuation that the estate attorney had apologized about was worth something that required different language. Marcus did not move into a different life. He moved into the same life at a different scale. He still worked the same hours. He still came back to problems until they were right. He still called his mother on Sundays. He was in the foundational sense the same person. He was also, finally, building something that was entirely his. Natalie and Marcus had their first dinner that was explicitly what it was, not friends, not colleagues, not the carefully managed thing it had been for 2 years, 14 months after the divorce was finalized. It was not dramatic. They were both too old for dramatic and too honest for pretending, and had been through too much adjacent to each other to approach it with anything other than directness. She said, "I didn't come to the parking lot just for Jennifer." He said, "I know." She said, "Does that bother you?" He said, "It would have at the time." "It doesn't now," she said. "Why not?" He said, "Because you came anyway. Whatever the reason you were there," she said. "That's a very gracious way to interpret it." He said, "I'm trying something new." She laughed, the actual surprised laugh of someone who did not see the punchline coming. He had always liked making people laugh. He was glad in that moment that he still could. But here is the question I want you to sit with. Natalie said she came to the parking lot for Jennifer, but she also came for herself. Does that change what she did? If her motivations were mixed, does that make the act of warning Marcus less good? Or does the act stand on its own regardless of why she did it? And if you were Jennifer, could you genuinely be happy for them? Drop your answer in the comments. Real ones only. And please tell me where you're watching from. Please like this video. It makes such a difference for stories like this. Subscribe if you haven't. It's free, always will be. Share it with someone. See you in the next one.